Hello, I'm glad to have you in my home. It's my turn to tell you a little bit about my life and times. I was born Adelaide Elisabeth Ballein on July the 12th, 1861 in Alexandria, Clark County, Missouri. My mother, Elisabeth Ballein, was born in Rome, New York, and my father was Henry. He died in 1867 from an accidental drowning when I was just 6 years old. In 1869, my mother married Ferdinand Schurman. A year later, at the age of 9, my parents moved to Neosho, Missouri, where my stepfather was a jeweler and a watchmaker. But he was so strict that we were not allowed to go places or to have company. But it was in Neosho that I attended public schools and graduated from a Catholic high school. Art was one of my favorite subjects while in high school. People have said that I was an excellent artist who painted landscapes and still lifes. In 1877, at the age of 16, I went to visit a friend in Independence, Kansas. It was there that I met my future husband, John Peter Baden. He was 10 years older than I. John Peter began to write me letters shortly after this meeting, and for the most part, our courtship was carried out in this manner. As things got a little more serious, he would refer to me as my little dove. Just a few months later, on January the 15th, 1878, we were married at my parents' home in Neosho. The announcement of the wedding in the newspaper stated that Mr. Baden had gained a prize more precious than the gold of Ophir, and one who, no doubt, will preside over his mansion in a queenly manner. Well, we boarded the westbound train for our future elegant home in Independence, Kansas, as my husband was involved in business there with his brothers, 2 of them. 10 months later, on November 25th, 1878, our first son, Martin William, was born. In 1879, John Peter, Martin, and I moved to Winfield, Kansas, as my husband had saved enough money, $5,000, to rent a building and start a business there. In 1881, our second son, Ernest, was born here in Winfield. In 1879, we were the only Lutherans here in town, so we began to have services in our home. We hired a clergyman, and as the congregation increased, the services were first held then in a school and in the Baden store, in the courthouse, and other places. Finally, I was confirmed a Lutheran in 1880, much to my husband's delight. He had been wanting me to do that since we met. Now let me tell you a little bit about my husband, John Peter. He was born March 24th in 1851 in Hanover, Germany, and he was the youngest of 5 children. He went by J.P. most of his life. His mother died when he was only 2 days old, so he never knew her, obviously. And his father was a farmer of moderate means, so J.P. had to pitch in at the age of 7 years old to herd sheep. Well, an incident in his early life showed how God, in his mysterious ways, shaped J.P.'s life. A lamb took sick, and he took it in his arms and nursed it. Well, he was so taken by the fact that this lamb was so helpless that he prayed to God for its recovery, and it did recover. This showed early in his life that he had a strong and true faith, and his favorite psalm became Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." After being confirmed in Germany, he set sail for New York City and arrived on May the 23rd, 1866, with his older brothers Henry and John. At the age of 15, he found his way to Hannibal, Missouri, where his oldest brother, Dietrich, had found work as a cigar maker. Well, after a few years of working and going to school, he joined his brothers, John and Henry, to open a grocery store in Independence. Being energetic and smart, he had other jobs also. He was always working. So it was in Winfield that the business endeavors exceeded my expectations. He was a whiz at business, advertising, and worked so hard to make the name of Baden stand for good value. All his businesses were successful, and the name Baden was known from New York City to Chicago to Texas. He dealt in wild game and poultry, eggs. He built a huge cold storage plant here, and an ice plant, and a packing plant. As an example, by March of 1892, 4 carloads, that is train carloads, of eggs a week were being shipped from Winfield, Kansas, and that amounted to 48,000 dozen eggs. It was the same with the butter and poultry. Our flour mill, which we were able to secure when the original owners failed, was extremely successful also. Now, in the early 1890s, we had a vision to build a college, and we provided the initial $1,200 for one block of land. And then we provided $50,000 for the construction of its first building. Construction began in 1863, and Baden Hall, as it became to be known, was completed in 1894. I named the institution St. John's College, with my husband's permission, after John the Evangelist, the beloved disciple of the Savior, the apostle of love, which embraces all and shuts out no one. It was JP's dedication that sustained the college through the early years of its history. Now, we were active in other civil groups and activities also. The Chautauqua Society, the Winfield Hospital Board, and my husband drove himself very hard. He developed a kidney ailment, unfortunately, when he was 46 years old. Finally, in February of 1900, he contracted pneumonia, and the good Lord called him home. Well, after JP's death, I took charge of the large businesses, assisted by my sons, Martin, now 22, and Ernest, now 19. I tried to retain all of my husband's employees and to adhere strictly to the methodological manner in which he had conducted his business. JB was a philanthropist, and it was my intent to carry on with many of those endeavors. I became president of the board of St. Mary's Hospital at 9th and College, and even furnished a room on the first floor of the hospital in his memory. When a new place of worship was needed for the Lutherans, I furnished the funds to build what became known as the Baden Memorial Lutheran Church on East 8th Avenue. For the furnishings, I provided the funding for a pipe organ, all the oak pews, as well as the large stained glass window of the Good Shepherd behind the altar. At that same time, the chapel at St. John's College needed a new organ, so I provided the funds for a new pipe organ there. I also purchased the land and gave it to the college for it to be used as a girls' dormitory. Well, continuing my philanthropies, I purchased land on Park Street and built the first building for the Lutheran Orphanage, which was moved to Winfield from Topeka, Kansas in 1907. I always did have a soft spot in my heart for the orphans, and I befriended many of them. Another interest of mine was history, and since we were residents of Cowley County, Kansas, I helped organize the Historical Society here. The year I passed away, I was also the president of that society. Of course, St. John's College was near and dear to my heart, and I helped put many students through college financially, and I did so without any obligation on their part. I also supported many crippled children. It gave money to Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, and at Christmas I gave parties for the deaf. And when I wasn't involved in those activities, I loved to garden. With the help of my gardener, we planted many flowers, especially hollyhocks, on the land that comprised the Baden block between 9th and 10th Avenues. I also took delight in sitting on my porch, looking at the flowers and watching the antics of the birds and the squirrels. I became close friends with the passers-by and kept a close touch on my countless friends and acquaintances. Well, around Winfield, I was considered a dignified woman. I lived simply and dressed either in black or white. I lived for 57 years in the home my husband built at 1203 East 9th Avenue. And I was a resident of Winfield for 63 years. And for many of those years, I was considered one of its leading citizens, and a most public-spirited citizen I was. In late January of 1942, I became ill and was taken to William Newton Memorial Hospital on January the 18th. I passed away on Tuesday, January 20th in 1942 at the age of 80 and was buried finally alongside my husband in Union Cemetery here in Winfield, Kansas. I enjoyed having this visit with you. I hope you have learned a lot about my family. Thank you so much.